Hey, what's up? This is part 24 of the Writing on Trump's Wall. It's where I read the post-it notes, different post-it notes from the wall that I recorded in Union Square subway station. This was a few days after Donald J. Trump won his first term as President of the United States of America. This was back in 2016 in November. I was in New York City at that time, and I read these thinking people literally mean things figuratively. So what was literally written? Then what do I figuratively think they were thinking of? And then I ask both you who's listening, and thank you for coming to listen, and just in general, and it would be amazing to actually ask these people that, do they still believe this? Would they still write this? When Donald Trump wins in 2020, are they still going to go up and feel like they should write the same thing on the same place? Those are the questions I have to ask. Okay, getting into the video. So I'm not going to give too much of the current affairs. Normally open current affairs here. There's a lot of things going on in the United States of America. There's a pivot away from the pandemic that's been going on that has been in part helped by the tragic situation that unfolded after George Floyd was in an altercation with police who seemed to be doing a little too much for what was actually in there. And then George Floyd died after that, and then chaos. Not chaos. Well, this is the thing. Americans literally mean things figuratively. The world literally means things figuratively. People are talking about chaos. But some people say, okay, that wasn't racism, what happened there. That was something else. And then they go and react to the actual reaction as chaos, as civil war, as the end of this, the end of that. No, let's not be too figurative with some of these terms. Is it really chaos? Was it really anarchy? Even Donald Trump's like, these people are anarchists. We're going to go out, we're going to stop, we're going to end their leaders. I don't care if they say they're anarchists. If they really are anarchists, they don't have leaders. But I've talked about this before. I have this could be this is part of why I'm making these series. Is am I the one who's in the wrong, thinking words should mean certain things? So when I use a certain word, I'll try to define it in certain places, and that's part of what I'm doing with this series, because it is clear that people don't mean anarchy for what I mean think that term means. For me, anarchy is simply just a situation where there is no rule. The political anarchy is a situation where there are no rulers. There's no ruling class that is above the laws. So the rule of law can most definitely exist in a state of anarchy. I am not against it. You can have the laws and you can have anarchy. You can have enforcement. You can have security. You can have justice system. These are things that can exist even under anarchy. That's how I look at it. The absence of laws, the absence of order, the absence of safety and security, that is chaos. Now that's what some people are referring to when they say anarchy. And then now with that chaos, I'm looking at the United States of America. There's riots in some places, there's protests, there's unrest, but is that chaos? United States of America is still one of the most peaceful places. Look at the United States of America versus somewhere like Somalia that people like to say, oh, Somalia is where anarchy is. And I'm like, wait, do you really think the United States of America has gone all the way down to Somalia levels? And even Somalia levels on the day to day, it's not like there's just constant rioting from day to day. By the time I post this, it's going to be probably Monday when I'm posting this. The riots are going to have died down already. It's Monday or Tuesday. I'm going to post this Monday or Tuesday. I'm recording this on June 7th. I think I'll post this Monday or Tuesday coming up. The riots, if they're continuing, I'd be surprised. I think they would have died down by this week. I'm already seeing some stories of people using all this cameras and film to actually try and track down some people. So there are going to be some places where people are going to get caught. There are going to be some places where I was wondering, why is people going out without masks and things like that? There's all these cameras everywhere. There are going to be some places where they're going to track this down. That's not a lack of order. That's not chaos. That's not this kind of thing. There's a lot of things coming out about the people involved. So I think we're going to see a lot of that, but mostly we're going to switch to full-on election season coverage in the United States of America, and I'll keep trying to get these out. Let me just get into the first one because it's just the confusing. There's things out there. Some things are unclear. Some other things that are clear. And I think this first one, I've actually looked at it before, will help kind of push this point down to you to what I'm getting at. And here's the first post-it. Love the stranger, for you were a stranger in the land of Israel. And then it follows here, it says, we are all, I don't know what that is, going to die. Actually, something is useless. live life or something, then pant. I don't know what that is. And that looks like a star. I don't know, is this like just a regular star? Is that a Satanist star? And I'm wondering if it's a Satanist star because it says here in the land of Israel. I tried to look and see what this was, and I found something from Deuteronomy in the Bible. This is the King James Version. This is the New King James Version, chapter 10, verse 19. It says, "Therefore love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall fear," verse 20 is, "you shall fear the Lord your God, and you shall serve him, and to him you shall hold fast and take oaths in his name." So this one, I don't know why they switched it to the land of Israel instead of using Egypt. Were they just taught this in a certain way? Are they trying to communicate something else? Then with my recording of the actual thing in this part when the camera was going, when I was recording this, I had some of what I had in mind back then was I'm going to actually try to go through these and actually talk about them. It was a long time back. Now, if I had gone back and done it the day after and thought, okay, let me look through this video and see what's actually legible and thought of the system that I would use to do it at that time, I might have seen that, oh, this isn't working. Let me go back the next day and do a better recording and take more pictures. But I did not do that because at that time I had a different idea of what I was going to do with this. It wasn't that important in my mind. Now, when I'm doing this, so when I'm going through and I'm taking these screen caps and getting these images, some of the things I can't necessarily tell. So even with this person, he could have intended something. He could have been taught something. He could have been taught that it was Israel. Maybe it's a different kind of, I don't know what kind of reading of the Bible. That's what I'm thinking might be Satanist. Because it'd probably be a different entire Bible at all where they're talking about Israel or something. And then even what is Satanism? Do people understand what Satanism? I'm just throwing this out with very little evidence. Just how people are looking at the protests and the riots and saying, oh, they're peaceful. Where's your evidence for them peaceful? Oh, it's not these people doing this. Where's your evidence for that? Oh, these pallets of bricks are being put. Where's your evidence for that? There's pre-existing conditions, there's things that we have that bias us towards certain things that could be, as I've said previously and I'll keep saying, could be out of my control, out of our control. I'm trying to understand this thing. This person, I don't know necessarily the message they're talking about. And even I put these together. Now, another thing I'm just noticing now, they're both written in red. One of them is in all caps, the other one isn't. Maybe they're not even together. So if this person was separate, why did they put Israel? Why did they put these together? When I was writing this, for some reason, when I screen capped this, I was like, are these together? Because of them both being in red and both being next to each other. Now, let's say this person had written them together, and for some reason had posted one above the other, or had come back and posted another one. There was something in the middle. I wouldn't have considered them to be the same. If the person switched pens, would I have considered it to be the same person? Unlikely. Could it have been two people using the same pen who were together? I don't know. Why did I even connect that? Why am I even talking about this? But this is just showing, like, this is some things with other things put in here. Why would somebody have this message of love the stranger then goes into this one? And I'm talking about strangers right here. These are strangers to me who wrote these things. Where's the communication? I'm trying to understand this, and I can't. I can't get the full understanding. I have limited understanding. I'm making this video trying to ask you guys, what do you see from this? What do you take from this understanding? Do you think I'm wrong? Why do you think the person switched to Israel? That's one thing. Let's just focus on that one, the first one itself. Why do you think they switched to Israel from Egypt? Do you think they were trying to make a message? Is that even Israel? Or is that something else? Could that actually be Egypt? Am I reading this okay? Is that an I? Is that an S? Is that an R? Is that an A? Is that an E? Is that an L? There's so many questions here. So this is one thing I'm saying. So that's just what I'm saying from the literal, from just trying to actually get the basic direct information about what's there, their limitations, let alone all the other figurative meaning and possible messaging that the person is supposed to trying to convey out there. That could be a whole thing. It could just be a troll. Now, as for the actual thing, the literal actual of it from the Bible, love the stranger for you are strangers in Israel, I think that's more about like, hey, just have some better idea. And I look at some of the more recent ones. You look at there was a version here from the New International Version. It was saying, and you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourself were foreigners in Egypt. Now you see this is now an updating. It's an updating, changing this, now changing it from the kind of language that's there. But maybe in the past, a stranger in the past was a foreigner. automatically. Because in the past, when the Bible was written, I'm talking about 2,000 years ago, and this is for a lot of people in the world today still, even people in the United States of America, you live in certain areas, even if you're in, it's not just in rural areas either, it's even in cities, even in New York City, some people will truly just live in a certain area, in a certain bubble of people, and they might not understand who that person is. That stranger to them would be foreign. Now, the way they define New York City could be just this small bubble of people. So if you come and you're not involved in this small bubble of people, you could be a foreigner to that small, to their personal definition of what New York City is, even if you're not literally from a different city, from a different suburb, from a different state, from a different country, from a different continent and things like that. You are still technically a stranger and a foreigner to what this person defines the world as. Now, with Americans in general, people are like, oh, this is what America is. People have different definitions of what America is. So if they meet somebody that does live in the American continent, is an American citizen, but doesn't seem to fit these things that they've defined Americans as, America as, then they would be foreign to their definition of America. But just going back to the past, when they're going to foreigners, now people say, oh, they're updating this so they can try to make religion to be, they can make Christianity to be more pro-migrant and immigrant and things like this. And somebody who is from the political left could look at this and say, oh, you in the political right, you're against foreigners, but then look at this. Look what the Bible said. It should be for foreigners. But then like the strangers thing, and then now it goes back to the thing. Now, the strangers thing. I don't think you just love the stranger. Personally, I'm like, you should have standards for the stranger. The stranger could be a stranger. Identify who that stranger is first. And using Egypt as an example for it, why using Egypt? Because by the myth, because this is found, like for the actual history that's coming out of this, goes against the biblical narrative. Because if you want to believe the Bible, it says they were enslaved and by pharaohs and they were building this and they're building that. There is some historical thing where people think, oh, the Jews were enslaved and they're the ones who built the actual pyramids. And I've done a separate video about how the pyramids themselves were actually made by laborers and people who were actually more skilled. And yeah, the work conditions they had are probably things that your average person today would not want to be subject to. But back then, it wasn't a slavery situation. But you look at the actual situation, and yes, there were Jews in Egypt, but they were not enslaved en masse like they actually supposedly talked about in the Bible. So if you actually look at it, then in the actual sense, you see this thing. If you look at the Bible and you look at it, how Jews really were treated there in Egypt, then you say, okay, look, yeah, they were a foreign, they were a diaspora, they were not a foreign. They were foreigners, they were not part of the culture, but then they slowly came in, and then there were different relations where, yeah, the local people were like, hey, we're going to dominate over you because this is our land. You're visitors here, but you can find your places, you can find your spaces to actually live here. But it wasn't just complete torture and things like this. Because if you actually use the Bible, then wouldn't it be like, oh, wait, they were treated very badly as strangers in Egypt? Or do they mean like once the Jews first got to Egypt and then they were part of the culture and then things slowly got worse and worse to get to the point where Moses had to be like, let my people go, and then they walked across the desert and went to the promised land, which again, there's no evidence for that happening, even if you actually had the physics and the things for the things to happen, even if you throw miracles and all that stuff in there. So there's all these questions that come up with this thing, where it's just a smorgasbord of what? Should you treat strangers the same way as you'd want to be treated as a stranger? I would say yes, as in just don't be just outright violent to people just because you don't understand them. But try to establish a communication, try to establish some understanding, and then once you realize that some of these strangers do some really strange things, you don't have to accept those things from them, just like you have no expectation to expect them to expect anything that you do that might be strange to them. Does that make any sense? I hope it does. So I'm probably going to end up here, and this has just been one posted. I'll probably try to get another one of these in. I'll try to do at least one of these, read one of these every weekend. I'll try to see if I can get another one of these in, since I only got one reading this time. And I've posted a lot of videos, so there's a lot of videos on my channel. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you for coming to listen. Let me know how you've been dealing with all the things coming out. Do you think things have changed? Like I said in the start, I am more certain than I've ever been that it's going to be now a landslide victory for Donald J. Trump coming up in 2020. And I'll keep these going. Let me see how many more I can get these get of these in before the actual election. We still got a couple of months to go, so I think I can get a good many of these in. Still got a lot left on the video and the photographs. But yeah, that's it for now. Let me know what you thought about this posting, because I'm still a bit confused with it. And goodbye.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, Donald John Trump.